This is Defiance Daily Dispatches for the Defiant. I am your host, Miles Taylor, and we got a lot to talk about today. Because it has been a very, very busy week. Today, we've got a special guest with us at the top of the show to break it all down. We'll get to him in a moment. The remarkable Scott MacFarlane is with us, award-winning journalist, formerly of CBS News, now of Substack fame. Looking forward to talking to Scott about a number of things, namely the fact that Donald Trump and Marco Rubio are saying the quiet part out loud when it comes to Cuba, the threats of a potential U.S. invasion or military action in Cuba are increasing. We're also going to talk about how Donald Trump and his administration have put out a little noticed order this week about banks and what that might mean for the administration's deportation machine ramping up dramatically. And then finally, we're going to talk about the slush fund. And we're going to talk about how Donald Trump's efforts to give cash to criminals might be blowing up his bigger effort to fund the federal government and his immigration agenda. And then, folks, because it's Friday, we're going to be talking about the MAGA losses of the week. And if you stay with us till the end, we will be, as always, awarding the Donald J. Trump Soulmate Award. Stay tuned for that. We've got some great nominees this week. But first, I want to talk about this issue with Marco Rubio, Donald Trump, and a little nation called Cuba. Because last night on this program, we talked about the Raul Castro indictment and how the Justice Department just indicted the leader of the Cuban island. And we told you to watch for what came next, because an indictment of a foreign leader has lately, with the Trump administration, been a prelude to something far bigger. We did not expect the answer to arrive this fast. Today, one day later, President Trump and Secretary of State Marco Rubio stood in front of cameras and openly raised military intervention in Cuba. In Rubio's words, Cuba has spent years, quote, buying time and waiting us out. And then, quote, they're not going to be able to wait us out or buy time. We're very serious. We're very focused, unquote. Yesterday was subtext. Today, Secretary of State Marco Rubio said it on the record. Now, I want to bring in our guest tonight, Seth MacFarlane, to talk about this and a number of other stories. Seth, it's great to have you here on the program, my friend. I want to get your reaction first, because more than anything, the merits of deposing the leader of Cuba notwithstanding, I feel like right now this is tone deaf when it comes to the attitude of the American people, who are already frustrated enough with one foreign intervention, multiple foreign interventions. I cannot fathom that the administration is pursuing another. What are you hearing out there? How do you take this news?
There's two different ways of viewing it, Miles. First of all, from the parochial level, this is playing well with Florida Republicans. They were spending much of the final days in session before the Memorial Day weekend touting the administration's efforts against Raul Castro, championing it to their constituents, who they believe still find this to be a priority. And in fact, they do find this to be a priority. So in Florida, this plays well. But through the rest of the country, at a moment of economic crisis, and I believe we're in a moment of economic crisis, these international entanglements don't resonate the way they would have in other times. You've seen that in Iran. You'll see that in Cuba. You've seen that in Venezuela, despite the short nature of that issue. I mean, we have a food and gas crisis underway. All of that trickles down. Feels like we're on the precipice of something worse economically. So we're not an internationally focused country right now, for better or for worse.
Can I ask you, Scott, on the prediction front? And you can make a lot of money on predictions these days. If you had the inside information, Scott, you could get yourself really rich on Polymarket if you knew exactly what the administration is going to do. But because I know you don't have any investments in this ultimate decision, I want to ask you, what do you think the order of operations is going to be here? Because a lot of people saw this indictment and very quickly said, well, this is exactly what they did with Maduro in Venezuela. And then shortly thereafter sent special forces in to detain the Venezuelan leader and bring him back to the United States. It seems like perhaps they're trying to follow a little bit more of a sequence with a little bit more breathing room, but it's not unreasonable to suspect that at any moment we're going to see special forces enter Havana and try to go seize its leader. What do you suspect happens here? And do you see a possibility of this being more significant, a potential invasion of the island itself?
I definitely see it as a possibility. And here's two things I can add to the party for my reporting. First of all, the news of the indictment of Raul Castro leaked out strategically in the days before the court filings were posted. That's not supposed to happen in the Department of Justice. They are supposed to speak through their court filings, but there were reporters who got advance word of this indictment. That is a symptom. That is a byproduct of a communication strategy to try to leading to something. Whatever that something is still a mystery, but you mentioned one big possibility. The other issue is there are members of Congress with whom I've been speaking who wonder aloud, how soon is there some military action against Cuba? Members of Congress are speaking about that possibility aloud. They're concerned about it. They think it's real. It's a real possibility.
Well, what do you think happens in Congress if this goes down? Even if it's just the snatch and grab Raul Castro and bring him back. I mean, with what's happened in Iran, with what's happened in Venezuela, with a distracted American superpower as inflation's on the rise, do you think that this type of action unapproved by Congress maybe pushes members of Congress over the edge? I don't mean a huge bulk of the MAGA caucus, but are there one or two members who are on the fence enough to be pissed off by this that it could really start to constrain Trump's authorities overseas?
Excellent instincts there. First of all, yeah, it's going to push some people over the ledge politically. And it's true because it's already happened with Iran. They had to peace out of here Thursday early without finishing their business because they didn't have the votes to avoid Democrats winning an Iran war authorization in the U.S. House. Republicans were defecting on Iran to join the Democrats. And so rather than hold the vote and lose, Miles, what do you do when you're going to lose the vote? You don't have the vote. It doesn't test the limits to think that the same thing would happen with Cuba, where you'd have some Republicans at this moment in time with an electorate that is very focused domestically and economically to defect on a war powers vote or some other vote of dissension towards military action in Cuba. No matter how laser-like it's promised to be, no matter how focused and how efficient it's promised to be, there's cynicism now because they heard that with Iran. I think this is a political problem, no matter how it manifests itself, because the country right now is dealing with an economic crisis. They don't want more costly foreign entanglements, no matter what's promised of those.
Scott, I want to ask you about another thing that hasn't quite received very much attention on Capitol Hill or in the media at all this week. And I think we're going to see more reporting on this, but it's this effort from the administration to start debanking migrants in this country. And people barely saw a blip on the radar because there was so much news this week. But if you were paying attention earlier in the week, Donald Trump signed an executive order that had this, very patriotic name, as they try to do at the White House, restoring integrity to America's financial system. But then you drill down into it and what it actually does. This executive order directs the Treasury Department and federal banking regulators and the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau to start treating a customer's immigration status as basically a financial red flag. So your bank account, your bank is now being asked to look at whether you might be deportable. This executive order is basically leading, Chase Bank and other banks by the hand to say, hey, can you help us, identify and deport your customers? That's a pretty big deal. I mean, notionally, if you read it straight up, it's, well, okay, it's supposed to factor into whether you get a mortgage or a car loan. And so that's one form of pressure on, people who may not be here unlawfully or have overstayed their visas. But given the regulatory hooks into the banks, this could quickly become a basic deportation tripwire for the federal government. And it specifically targets people who use something called an ITIN. That's an individual taxpayer identification number, which is the number the IRS issues so that people without a social security number can do one very specific thing: pay their taxes. So I want you to sit with the logic here for a second, Scott, because the government created that system so that workers could pay into the system. And now the government's treating that number like it's a red flag, like it's a bad thing.
Mm-hmm.
And, I want to be fair about the scope of this because it matters. After they got some pushback from the banking industry, the order stopped short of turning this into a hard mandate. It's written as guidance, right? So it basically tells the CFPB, this government agency, to consider clarifying that potential deportation is a valid risk for lenders. But that still has a very significant impact on these industries, Scott, who, as you know, are very attuned to anything the administration asks, lest they be punished for not following the guidance, right? It's a chilling effect. What do you make of this? Have you heard anything on this front? And perhaps does it signal a next level of the administration's revenge agenda into the deeper gears of government?
Really is valuable, your time with the Department of Homeland Security. You find these important issues that otherwise are off the radar because you know how significant things like these are. There's a couple hurdles immediately, and there's this mixed political ramification from it. First of all, the hurdles. You better believe there's going to be a series of lawsuits. Like, I'll bet the mortgage payment. There are legal challenges we have yet to see that are coming against an executive order that reaches so far, or at least pretends to reach so far. What's more, the industry. This is an industry burden, and I recognize what you're saying, that the banking industry seemed to push back, and maybe this got watered down a bit. But I can't imagine the industry isn't going to push back some more because this is more work for more people. It also may be a disincentive for people to bank, or a disincentive for people to use their products. Never a good business model to lose customers of any way, shape, or form for any reason. So I think there's going to be challenges to this that are mustered that maybe we haven't seen yet. Political ramifications are interesting, and they're mixed. The administration would love for people to say, we want to protect the rights of migrants to do X, Y, and Z. That is political ground they like to be walking on and fighting on. Whether you think they're right or wrong, they love arguing over issues involving immigration. They don't like fighting over issues about $5 gas, $300 groceries, and the other crises of the day inside the administration. So they want to be talking about this general topic. What's more, the downside politically is interesting to me at this moment in time. They seem to assume, Miles, that their gerrymandering has secured them 5 more seats in Texas. I don't know about that. There are 2 seats in play held by Democrats that have a large component of Hispanic voters who went for Donald Trump in 2024 and who he has done everything possible to disengage and to turn off in 2026. I don't know what the total output politically is going to be of these types of things, but I think it's mixed.
Well, yeah. And there's writ large, which we'll talk about in a moment, a lot of backfiring in the Trump political agenda right now in terms of playing in some of these elections the impact it has on his policy agenda. One thing I already saw on this, Scott, with the banking piece is there was a law firm that said this week that roughly 3 out of every 10 of their clients, an immigration law firm, by the way, have already received unexpected requests from their banks asking for additional immigration documents, which is an early indicator of the fact that this is already starting to have some teeth, even though it's just industry guidance. For people who don't care about immigration, right? For folks who don't say that this matters to them, there's an interesting irony here, though, which is that even if they don't care about immigration, they've probably heard Republicans talking about how immigrants don't pay their taxes and aren't paying their fair share. And the irony of this whole thing is this order it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. It makes it less easy for immigrants to go pay their taxes, which is why these ITINs existed. But there's another thing that ordinary Americans, I think, Scott, here should be paying attention to, which is what the Trump administration does on immigration has often been a leading indicator of what the administration will do to other targets of the president's ire. Take, for instance, the fact that Donald Trump initially was deploying the National Guard to cities and states under the justification that it was for immigration. But very quickly, Donald Trump started to deploy the National Guard to places to crack down on crime. And they just so happened to be Democratic blue states and cities, which then he said the quiet part out loud. And he said, I'm sending this into Democratic cities because they're not run well. I could go on down the list of things that started off as immigration enforcement and became something else. We saw this in Minnesota. It started as an immigration crackdown, and then we saw 2 protesters killed. We saw them referred to as domestic terrorists. We saw it become a very, very different picture. So when folks are seeing the Trump administration issue guidance to banks about who should and who should not receive accounts, I think it makes people beyond the immigration world worried about what this administration could do and who else they might try to debank.
In so many ways, that one included, Miles. Feels like the Trump team is running a 2024 campaign still, not recognizing times have changed and priorities have changed. You see this otherisms, this othering of people of color. You see this way of villainizing immigrants to America, which seemed to resonate with some number of voters in 2024, which doesn't seem as top of mind now. What's more, on Friday afternoons, the president's in Rockland County, New York, campaigning alongside Republican Mike Lawler and fixated throughout the campaign speech on transgender athletes in sports, which certainly was a winner for him in 2024, but may not be the prominent issue he thinks it is in 2026. We have a cost crisis unfolding: healthcare costs, college costs, housing costs, and the aforementioned food, fuel, and fertilizer costs. It may be, a first world problem to be talking about transgender athletes and immigration policies at a moment when there's a crisis underway at home and people can't pay their bills. I don't understand this myopic fixation on running the 2024 playbook again, and I'm not sure it's going to work.
As an aside, I think it's interesting that you note the appearance with Mike Lawler. I don't know if I've seen anyone say this yet. I'm sure that they have. I happen to know that Mike Lawler hates the president. I think it's very interesting that, Donald Trump, and Donald Trump's got to know that too. Lawler
I got a little reporting on that, but I want you to finish your thought.
Well, yeah, I mean, look, Lawler's a New York Republican moderate who's just barely hanging on there, and is not someone who sides often with the president. In fact, flirts with constant criticism of the administration on cable news and elsewhere. The guy knows who Donald Trump is. He hates Donald Trump, and yet Donald Trump is still out there campaigning for him because he's so worried about losing the majority. But I'm much more interested in your reporting there, Scott.
No, it's a great beta test, a good example to drill down into, Miles, to get a sense of where we are for the midterm elections. Mike Lawler is the most endangered Republican in the U.S. House. He is one of only 3 in districts won by Kamala Harris in 2024, one of 3 Republicans representing a Harris-won district. He also has tons of money being spent against him. He has a district that he calls very purple, which is fine. It's a fine characterization. It's a fair characterization, but we're in a wave election for Democrats potentially. So purple's trouble. Purple ain't safe. Purple gets you routed. But he told me that one of the strategies he employs, including with this visit by the president, is trying to reach his district. He lives in a news desert. Is that crazy? He's in upstate New York, not too far from New York City, but there's not really any local media there for reasons beyond my understanding. And he needs national media to get his voice and his ideas out to his district, to the local constituents. And this is obviously the best way to get national coverage, is to have Donald Trump nearby. And this was pledged to be an event about the state and local tax deduction. Huge issue in New York. Huge issue in high-tax states like New York.
Can you keep Donald Trump on message for that? No.
He was on message for seconds about it. Now, granted, when Trump was speaking Friday afternoon in Rockland County, New York, the only time he invoked Lawler by name was about state and local taxes. Then Trump went off on his wild, unhinged rants about other things. So when he talked about Lawler, he was on message, but that was just a moment in a broader speech. So I'm not sure. Maybe it serves Lawler. Maybe it's smart. Maybe he's crazy as a fox bringing the president into a district where he's probably not very popular because he was on message for that breath. But I wouldn't do it if I was endangered. If I was an endangered member of my party, I would never bring the standard bearer whose numbers are in the toilet to my hometown.
Look, it's not what I would advise Lawler, not least of which is because clearly his personal views of the president are so misaligned with the man. I don't think I would want him in the district, but also politically, like you said, Scott, we're going to talk about the president's latest poll numbers later in the program, but his numbers are cratering, and they're cratering among independents. And you want those independents in a purple district to break your direction. You don't want to bring in the albatross that's going to bring your likelihood of victory in. But I won't question his campaign tactics. I suppose he knows his district better than me. But Scott, I do want to ask you about another story where politics has hampered the administration's agenda in remarkable fashion this week. And you mentioned it earlier, which is the slush fund that the Justice Department announced tied to alleged weaponization in the past administration. Senate Republicans, you've been speaking to them. They are in open revolt. And like you said, they left town before they could even vote on the president's budget. And, the ballroom was tangled up in that mess too. And it's pretty telling that they just gave up and went home rather than grapple with all of this. And that $1.776 billion anti-weaponization fund is now hanging in the balance. I know that you've reported that there are conversations about what kind of actions the Senate and perhaps the House could take to allay member concerns. But it is significant that Donald Trump started off this week at war with Republicans who've opposed him. And now he's losing votes. He's losing votes because he's going after members of Congress whose votes he needs to actually keep some of these things sustained. Now, they sent Todd Blanche, the acting attorney general, up to Capitol Hill to try to sell this slush fund. Another thing politically, Scott, I'm not sure I'd recommend it. Persuade anyone of anything. I'm not sure I would send Todd Blanche up there. And according to sources who were in that meeting, Republican senators didn't just object to the slush fund on principle. They warned the acting attorney general directly that the fund, this idea itself, could cost them their Senate majority in November. What are you hearing on that front?
I've got a lot here on this one. First of all, you could put this entire enterprise of selling the fund to America and to Congress on a White House blooper reel. It's been a malignant clown show. Ted Cruz has acknowledged publicly that not only was Todd Blanche criticized or met with firm response to this idea of a slush fund, he was screamed at. And this is by the Republican senators. Democrats, of course, are going to be all against this thing. It's a fanciful notion at this point that this fund makes it out the way the president wants it to be, makes it out of Congress, makes it through the gauntlet the way he wants it to be. This thing's going to get gutted, and it's inevitable now. Let me tell you why. First of all, Congress wants in on this thing. They are not just going to let this thing go without getting their fingerprints on it, whether they got to change the language in their appropriations, pass some legislation to limit it, put guardrails on. Congress is not going to let this go by without stopping it, pausing it, changing it, and then letting it move on, maybe. Here's why. You're going to need 50 Republican votes to allow this fund to go forward in any way, shape, or form. Not because the order from the president or the Department of Justice requires Congress to approve it, but Democrats are going to put an amendment on every single thing that comes before them to cut off the fund, to prevent the fund from being used for cop beaters, to prevent the fund from being used for election deniers, to prevent the fund from being used by anybody violent, any other elected office holders. They're going to try to amend it every chance they get, which means you need 50 Republicans to stop every amendment. How many do you have right now, Miles? You got 53 Republicans. You can lose 3 of them. You've already lost 3. Bill Cassidy has said no to this thing. Tom Tillis calls it stupid on stilts. Mitch McConnell calls it utter nonsense and ridiculous. And that doesn't count the most endangered member of the Senate in the Republican conference, Susan Collins, who's up for reelection, who's already expressed her concern about this. Lisa Murkowski hasn't been heard yet. There are others. There are some who are in races we're not paying attention to. How about the races in Mississippi? How about the race in Texas? I assume John Cornyn isn't disaffected by his turn, by how Trump turned away from him. There are others. I'm not sure this thing has the votes to stand up at all once the Senate gets done with it.
Well, Scott, I also have to point out that in the days since it was announced, almost the worst PR you could ask for, just by virtue of what it was. But then that was compounded by the line that started forming and who was standing in line to apply for the money. You had Michael Caputo, a former Trump health official, put in a request for $2.7 million. You had Enrico Tarrio, the former head of the Proud Boys, who was sentenced to 22 years for seditious conspiracy before Donald Trump pardoned him. You had him telling reporters he expects somewhere between $2 and $5 million. His words were, quote, "I'm not greedy, though." Then you had an attorney who represents more than 400 of the January 6th defendants, criminals, including people, by the way, who've been subsequently convicted on charges related to pedophilia. You had that attorney to a lot of those defendants warning that $1.7 billion might not even be enough to go around, which was even worse PR, that you've got all of these convicted criminals and their lawyers going out there and saying, we're not greedy, but we want millions, we want millions, we want millions, which I think just really, if you're a vulnerable Republican in the Senate, cements in your view, I cannot be the one to give these people cash. I mean, the optics problem here, aside from the morality and the legality, is just extraordinary. I've never seen anything like it.
I've already seen infighting, public infighting, where else on social media, among January 6th defendants arguing with each other about who deserves money, who should get the most, who should get less. You weren't as seriously mistreated as I was. That was inevitable. But you couldn't ask for a worse cast of characters to make a sell to the American public and the U.S. Senate towards why their taxpayer money, why our taxpayer money at this moment in time should go for this bonkers slush fund. The PR is terrible. I think you characterized it properly, Miles. You know what else is a PR loss for the administration? They've given up fighting that we all call it a slush fund now. That is common nomenclature now among major media. We're just going to call it a slush fund. We're not going to try to call it the anti-weaponization fund because that's not how the audience, the public's receiving it. This thing is dead. It's just a matter of when they decide to bury it. It's not going to work. They're going to have to scale it back significantly in terms of dollar amount, who's qualified, who could possibly get money. They're not going to give 400 million tax dollars to the pillow guy right now. It's not going to work. So they need to change everything about this to get it through the gauntlet.
That was my favorite one of all of them, Scott, is that the My Pillow guy had the gall to basically imply that he deserved 1/4 of the fund.
Yeah.
Just 1/4 of the fund.
The richest guy among the people seeking money with like 1/4 of the fund. Yeah, that's how rich guys become rich, though, Miles. They think that way.
That's right. No scruples. Scott, before we let you go, one final question. News broke this afternoon. I know you were following it as well, that Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard has resigned, is planning to resign from her position effective next month. It was suspected that she might resign because of her differences with Donald Trump on the Iran war, among other issues. One of her deputies, Joe Kent, as you and I know, resigned in protest from the administration and has been very vocal. She cited in her letter a family health issue. Her husband is apparently very sick. I don't want to prejudge that. No reason to doubt the truth behind the matter, but do you think there is some truth to the ideological distance between Tulsi Gabbard and the president, and what it might potentially signal about her willingness to go out there after all of this and break with Donald Trump over the war with Iran?
A few things. Let's take them in order of importance. First of all, we pray for the family. This is a very tough piece of health news that Tulsi Gabbard revealed to us, and it should be acknowledged. Of course, it should be acknowledged declaratively by all of us. Secondary importance is what happens politically here, but it's not going to be lost on a lot of people that we have 4 cabinet members gone in quick succession. All 4 of them are women. That's not going to be unnoticed. Tulsi Gabbard did share a no more foreign entanglements ethos that her deputy had, and he pieced out with the same argument that I cannot be involved with the administration that is involving itself needlessly in another foreign war. Tulsi Gabbard didn't speak that way about it, but she did have a different entanglement that's problematic. She was there on site, you'll recall, Miles, in Fulton County, Georgia, in January when the feds raided a county and seized the 2020 election ballots. And her presence there was, to put it mildly, provocative. But to be clearer, it's a problem for the raid because the Fulton County has sued to get their ballots back and called this a weaponized investigation. Tulsi Gabbard's presence is part of their argument. All kinds of issues there. Her last day is at the end of June. I just am struck by how the turnover in the cabinet seems all to be female.
Well, I will say I'm not struck by it because I remember the way that Donald Trump used to talk behind the scenes to his female cabinet members.
Really?
The men would get, ribbing from him, jokes, some policy conversations. The women would get critiqued on their TV performances. They would get comments about their makeup. They would get comments about their outfits. Look, I've worked for some people who've been accused of being sexist, and I'll say, no, they're not. That's a false accusation. I've worked with other people like Donald Trump who's been accused of it and seen it firsthand. So not terribly surprising that he's put the women on the chopping block first, but we'll see what happens next. And I think we'll watch with great curiosity, Scott, to see who the president nominates for the position. And as you're reporting from Capitol Hill, whether or not they will have the votes to get through. So we'll be staying tuned for who the president decides to put out there. The incredible Scott MacFarlane. If you're not following Scott MacFarlane Reports, if you're not subscribed to him on Substack, you're making a grievous error and you're missing out on things that you should be up on. So please do follow and subscribe. Scott, is there anywhere else folks should be tagging along with your incredible reporting?
I appreciate your asking. We 365 days a year have episodes of Scott MacFarlane Reports on YouTube. It's all enterprise reporting. It's all exclusive. We're going to do this till democracy is secure.
You should urge me, if you're already a follower of Scott, in his comments, for him to take at least one day off in those 365 days. We want him to recharge his batteries.
We can all sleep when democracy is preserved.
We appreciate you, my friend. Thank you for everything, Scott. Great to be with you, and we'll catch up again soon. Take care. Well, listen, friends, because it is Friday, we are going to go through now a couple of the MAGA losses of the week. Now, we just touched one of them, which is this issue of the ballroom. We briefly mentioned it because it's tied up in this discussion about the slush fund this week. But the number one MAGA loss for the week, we would say, is that these two issues, ballroom and slush fund, which were the president's top priorities going into this week, appear, as you just heard in our conversation with Scott, to be more than moribund. In Scott's words, you just heard it first, they are dead. They're dead, dead, dead. Now, don't put it past the Trump administration to try to find other legal maneuvers to resuscitate the slush fund, to resuscitate the ballroom. But for now, it is evident that at least on Capitol Hill, there is no rubber stamp. The rubber stamp Donald Trump has counted on for at least his first year back in office, well, it's out of ink, folks. It's out of ink. That's MAGA loss number one for the week. MAGA loss number two for the week. I want to show you a poll. I want to show you a poll because people have already been talking about how bad Donald Trump's numbers are. Take a look here. I want you to look at that column that says approve. Donald Trump's approval rating hit the lowest number that he has ever notched since he has been in office, in the first term or the second term. Look at that column right there, May 2026, 31%. You can see there how this has fallen over the past year. A year ago, Donald Trump was at 41% approval rating. How on earth has he lost 10%? Well, I'll tell you, the only way for him to go that low is if he is losing Republican voters and MAGA voters in particular. That is the only way. Donald Trump's numbers have been cratering, in part because since he began this war with Iran, there have been major defections from the MAGA movement. This shows no signs of clearing up because his voters are also having to pay for gas. They're also having to buy groceries. They're also seeing the same news about what Donald Trump is choosing to focus on. And he's measuring the drapes, literally measuring the drapes for the ballroom, instead of addressing the issues that his own voters elected him for. Big loss of the week, Donald Trump. It's catching up with you. Third, MAGA loss of the week. And we have a special guest here to bring in for this one. We didn't expect that we were going to have him today because he was flying back. But do we have my Defiance.org co-founder, Xander Schultz?
Oh! I got one. There we go.
Hi, buddy. We did not expect you to make it back from the airport in time.
I didn't expect it. You know what, though? I can't stay away for too long because every time I'm away for a day, there's like a real professional as your partner between Maritza and Scott McFarlane. So
we were auditioning Scott to take over for you inside the organization. In fact, we had just sent him a job offer right when you were coming on. I'll see if he signed it, but
he's really good. He's really good at what he does. I totally get it. Yeah, I'm like real in danger of being Wally pipped at some point. And getting Maurice or Scott to jump in as my Lou Gehrig.
Too good. Well, how was the flight? Before we get to the third MAGA loss,
a little bumpy. I gotta admit, it wasn't my favorite flight that I've had across the country, but it was all right. Yeah, I just tuned in. I read about the first two losses. Bad week for MAGA. Well, they're stacking bad weeks.
Let me take you into the third loss of the week because I got to tell you, if you had polled any of our Defiance.org members or supporters at the top of this week, I know, folks, I get your messages all week long. I know you would have said, this is a bad week. But did you expect that we would get to the end of the week and it would be going so poorly for the president? Because he is getting part kicked out of politically this week. And it's all phone. All of it is self-owned. And this third one goes in that category, Xander, of self-owned catastrophes, which is that a federal judge has ruled that the White House, including the chief of staff, Susie Wiles, Stephen Miller, has ordered them to preserve their documents, has told them, preserve your text messages, preserve your emails, turn over your secret records, because they made the stupid decision to declare that they didn't think the Presidential Records Act applied to them anymore. Okay, I want to be clear with everyone. The Presidential Records Act was passed decades ago by the United States Senate, by the United States House of Representatives, and signed by the president. That makes it, if you don't know anything about American democracy, a law that you are required to abide by. It's not an optional thing. It's not like
that's a good cliffhanger. I was in on the cliffhanger.
Yeah, it's not like the guidance we talked about earlier that the administration put out to banks. It's a law. And the administration went out there publicly and said, yeah, we don't think it applies to us. We don't think we need to preserve presidential records. Those are the communications that happen inside the White House, the private communications about how executive orders are drafted and passed, secret documents, all of those things. After Richard Nixon was president, Congress said it was already, we think, implicit that official government records needed to be preserved and not shredded or torched. But now we're going to say it's the law not to hide the evidence of what you're working on. And this administration said, no, it's not. Well, thankfully, they were sued right out of the gate. And now it's gotten worse for them because a federal judge is basically honing in and saying, preserve your records and may gain early access to those records through this lawsuit. Talk about backfire on the administration to have them, Xander, basically admit, yeah, we're going to shred the evidence. We're going to burn it. And then a federal judge say, not only are you not going to do that, but I'm probably going to place additional restrictions on you because you threatened to it. So there you go.
Miles, before I got this Defiance.org neon, I almost got a neon that just said, you can't do that. And I was going to turn it on whenever we had one of these segments. And the Defiance.org one was too cool. And I wasn't about to buy two of these things. So I ended up going with that one. But I at times like these, I really wish I had it. To your point about it, like early in the week, it feels like it's going so poorly. It almost just is correlated with how active they are. Because eventually these guys get shot down. It's just like if they're very active for a little while, you forget that they'll eventually be shot down across the board like they've been throughout this whole second administration. It feels really scary. They try to claim powers they do not have. And luckily for us, Congress hasn't been a ton of help, but some of our institutions are holding, especially the lower courts, especially heroes like Norm Eisen and Mark Elias and Neil Katyal and some of the awesome Supreme Court lawyers who are kicking this administration's ass, time after time. So it's important, I guess, to woosah when we see some of these headlines and just give our institutions a beat to catch up. And oftentimes they do, as was this case.
Well, and it's also just one of those things, Andrew, that feels like a remarkable admission from the administration. I mean,
unbelievable.
If you're a criminal and you do something against the law and then you cover up the evidence, that cover up is itself a crime. They've basically done that. They undertook criminal action this week, basically with this slush fund, among other things. But they've also been saying, hey, by the way, world, we've decided we're allowed to delete the evidence of our crimes. Now they're being told, no, what are you talking about? You can't do that. Again, a remarkable unforced error, as you would say in sports.
I realize what gangster they remind me most of. Yeah, it's please. Al Capone, but in the later years after he had syphilis infect his brain, it's that era of Al Capone. It's the guy still trying to act like a gangster, but just being a syphilitic moron while doing it. I think that's the best comp for our president at the moment. Unfortunately, not the comp I want for my president.
Not the comp you want for your president. Well, Xander, I'm thrilled you're with us because our final segment today, because it's Friday, is we're going to award the Donald J. Trump Soulmate Award for the week. And if this is the first time you're with us and hearing about this, we're talking about soulmate as in SOLE, mate, which is who is in that shoe? Because Donald Trump apparently, who's going in that shoe? He likes to give out, this is true, he likes to give out free pairs of his favorite shoes, the black Florsheim Oxfords produced out of Chicago, which it sounds like a lot of cabinet members are wearing. There's a lot of pictures of cabinet members wearing them. Donald Trump guesses their size, and there's pictures of Marco Rubio walking around in floppy shoes that don't fit him, that people suspect were a gift from the president. And it just goes to show you how willing these people are. They're willing to metaphorically walk in his shoes if he wants them to, that they're so devoted. So we give out this prize every week to the most devoted, most enthusiastic, most gravity-defying act of bootlicking of the week. Now, here's our ask for you, audience, and I'm going to remind you of this again once we give the award. We're no longer shipping these shoes to the award winners because they keep returning them. This is true. I
love that you were able to get it to them. Props to you that you were able to deliver.
We were getting these shoes delivered to the award winners with a little message that let them know why they won it for being a Donald Trump bootlicker. And I wasn't getting any messages from them. I was only getting the alert when the shoes had been returned and our credit card had been refunded. And so I said to Xander, okay, we're going to stop shipping the shoes because not that I expect them to keep them, but I think there's a more powerful way, even more powerful than receiving the shoes for them to get the message. And that is for you all to let them know that they were the award winner. So whoever wins this week, I urge you, if they have social media, to find their social media accounts and post in their messages, letting them know that defiance.org awarded them the Donald J. Trump Soulmate Award. And we'll let you take a screenshot of the picture at the end and make sure that they have it on their timeline. All right, without further ado, we're going to talk about who the nominees are this week. Our first nominee is the illustrious Acting Attorney General of the United States, Todd Blanche, for spending 2 full hours this week behind closed doors, personally trying to convince Republican senators to hand the president that $1.776 billion taxpayer slush fund and walking back out to find members of his own party calling it a payout pot for punks. That, folks, is showing up for your guy to go there and try to sell a very obviously illegal thing to the American public. Takes an awful lot of saliva to clean those boots. What do you think, Xander?
They successfully took the heat off the ballroom. If their goal was to take the heat off their very dumb $1 billion ballroom by making an even worse, use of taxpayer money, they did that. I kind of briefly forgot about the $1 billion ballroom for a little bit.
I feel like that's a really good charitable explanation for what happened here. Is they were sitting in a room this week and they were like, shit. Yeah, the ballroom press, it's terrible. It's going to sink us politically. Like, what's the biggest distraction we could make? And they're like, let's just take billions and gift it to criminals. Like, criminals who beat the shit out of cops on TV. Let's go do that.
It does make the ballroom feel very reasonable all of a sudden in comparison.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that should be a MAGA success of the week, is they successfully shifted the attention away from what was obviously one of the most corrupt things a president's ever done, the ballroom. All right, well, our second nominee this week is Jeff Bezos, the founder of Amazon, the world's fourth richest man, worth roughly $270 billion. You see that quote there on the screen, folks? If you didn't catch it earlier this week, Jeff Bezos went on CNBC as gas was hitting $4 a gallon, and then in some places, $6.50 a gallon, and the president's approval was cratering. He went on TV and informed America that Donald Trump is, quote, a more mature, more disciplined version of himself with, quote, lots of good ideas. Yet Jeff Bezos declined to name a single one. Xander, I got to tell you, if you are a tech billionaire, you don't need to go suck up to the president of the United States. You're already absurdly rich. You have a huge company. And yet to watch these guys, ones including Jeff Bezos, who hated Donald Trump in the first term, crawl on all fours and grovel about how he's more mature and more disciplined. And by the way, spend millions of dollars to do documentaries, flattering, fawning documentaries about his wife to put on your platforms, the documentary Melania that Jeff Bezos' company bankrolled. What does that say to you about the insecurity of a guy like that you have got to go plead for the president's favor all the time when you should already be, I don't know, secure in your own skin?
I think if you're that rich, there's probably a crater-sized hole in you, because that means you made $100 million and you decide not to quit and go hang out with your family and take up hobbies. You made $1 billion and you decide not to quit and go spend time with your family, maybe become just a philanthropist and do good things in your community and whatnot, right? So there's some hole that the guys at that level in particular are trying to fill that make them behave more pitifully than you would expect people with their type of leverage and security in the world. And I've been around a decent amount of these folks. One of my past jobs is trying to organize very wealthy people to support and protect democracy. They're not all like that. Some people, made one good bet and they became a billionaire, started one company. But guys like Bezos that stay in the game and then do these very shameful things to maintain their status as I don't know what. There's a hole in these guys. There's a hole in Donald Trump, obviously, that he's trying to fill. There's a hole in these guys in the same way.
I honestly, I got to say, man, that's one of the best pieces of analysis I've heard on why so many of these CEOs have capitulated to Donald Trump. And people are baffled that in the first term, so many of these folks were opposed to him. And I think it's because in the first term, they didn't expect him to be successful, right? And they were exactly. They didn't expect him to win re-election. They thought, I can go against the grain. He won't be president. And then they felt relieved when Biden won. But then when Trump won again, they all did a 180. And I think your point's right, is that these guys will never stop hustling. And so they're like, fine, doesn't matter. I'll totally sell my soul to this guy because now he's shown me I should be afraid of him. And many of them shown themselves perfectly willing to sell their souls month after month, year after year. Well,
I mean, I think that's why, Miles, these guys believe in that simulation theory. It's to alleviate themselves of the guilt of behaving as they are. They have to just pretend we're all non-playable characters in some simulation to allow themselves to behave so so pathologically. That's why I think that's why that theory is so popular in Silicon Valley.
Dude, if you don't write a piece on that, we're missing out.
Okay.
Stay tuned, everyone, for the Defiance.news piece on the crater-sized hole inside the billionaires. The crater-sized moral hole.
Titled, "This isn't a video game, assholes." that's the title of the piece.
Honestly, it should be the title of the piece. Everyone, make sure to put pressure on Xander in his comments to get that piece done. All right, our third nominee of the week for the Donald J. Trump Soulmate Award is this guy. You recognize that face? I know it looks like a costume. I mean, it looks like a wig every time and a fake mustache, but I think at least the hair is real. It's probably dyed. I suspect the mustache is too. That is MyPillow CEO Mike Lindell, a guy whose qualifications you wouldn't suspect put him at the center of an effort to overturn the 2020 election. And yet that's where Mike Lindell, MyPillow CEO, found himself in 2020. He has spent, apparently, $25 million of his own money pushing that story that the 2020 election was stolen. He helped organize the rally that became the January 6th insurrection. And he is now, this week, one of the first in line demanding money from that slush fund, implying that taxpayers should reimburse him up to $400 million. His reasoning, well, is, quote, that his company was the most attacked company in history. Now, Lindell has not, to my knowledge, requested $400 million, but he has suggested that's how much he lost, setting up a claim for that fund in the hundreds of millions. I mentioned this earlier, Xander, when Scott McFarlane was on, that Mike Lindell had the gall this week to suggest that a full fourth of this crazy weaponization fund should go to him for all of his troubles in trying to prevent the peaceful transfer of power. I don't know. Maybe if we did that, though, Xander, he could stuff MyPillow pillows with shredded money. That could be interesting. Or maybe not shredded, just actual cash. I might buy a MyPillow again if it had money in it.
How big is the pillow industry? Are we missing out? Do we need to make Defiance pillows? I didn't think any pillow company could claim $400 million in losses. Maybe I haven't been tracking over there how lucrative that space is.
Well, I mean, everyone uses one, and
it's true.
But I think
I know there were like behemoths like that.
I think you once had a better idea. Do people know this about you? Do they know the domain you own? Maybe we shouldn't share it. Maybe we should use it at some point. I'm talking about not pillows. I'm talking about toilet paper.
Oh yeah, toilet paper. I can share it because it's not up right now. We had the domain ready, and then I realized I have no idea how to sell toilet paper, and it took too much work to figure it out. But I had a domain called Done With This Shit, and you could choose your issue. You know, you could be done with, I don't know, the destruction of the climate, or you could be done with racism. And then, you know, pick how many toilet rolls you need a month, and you would be funding. It would be a super PAC, actually. It would just fund organizers that were fighting on behalf of that issue. We might bring it back. That is I haven't done anything this mischievous before I got back into Defiance. Defiance is appropriately mischievous. I think we can launch that company.
This was one of the first conversations I ever had with Xander Schultz. So people know. I immediately knew I liked him because we were talking about Alan Keynes and Milton Friedman and economic theory. And Xander quickly pivoted into, hey, you know, a domain name I've got? I've been thinking about launching this thing. So we could raise money to defeat Trump and his allies. This was years ago. And he's like, and it's donewiththishit.com or .org or something like that. And he's like, and I think I have a distributor who will custom print toilet paper with their faces on it, and all of the proceeds will go to fund the campaigns of their opponents. I was like, I love this guy. This is an ideas guy. He can consider the reinvention of economic theory in the modern era, and a clever idea to use toilet paper to raise funds to go after our political adversaries. And Xander has brought that energy. So there you go, folks. One of the early stories from the vault. All right, Xander, we gotta give this award.
Who's the winner?
Drum roll. The winner this week, by your vote and mine, is actually Mike Lindell. Mike Lindell, there he is, has won the Donald J. Trump Soulmate Award this week. Megan, our amazing summer associate, is going to keep that image on the screen because if you want, folks, you could just screenshot it on your phone, or if you're watching on your computer and you know how to take screenshots, or if you're waiting for the replay, you can go back and learn how to take a screenshot. But I would suggest you take a picture of that and drop it into Mike Lindell's comments. Go ahead, go to his social media and let him know you don't have to be harassing. You don't have to say means. You can say nices. You can say, congratulations. I saw that you won this award today. Good job. And they'll find out. They'll find out.
I'm posting it right now on Substack.
There you go. There you go. We're gonna start. We'll start coming up with an even easier package. Xander, maybe there's like a web address, like we can create just a page for each awardee, and folks can just copy and paste it into their comments, and it'll populate. That should be easy enough to do. We'll do that for next Friday, and just to make sure that I carve out the time for it, because we do it all live. I'm just going to add it to my I'm going to add it to my calendar here. Xander, I do want to ask you, since you're joining us and while I'm calendaring, your highlight of the week. I had a lot of highlights of this week.
Oh my gosh.
I mentioned to folks earlier today, I did our weekly coffee with our crew, and I talked about how the announcement on the Trump Epstein bookmobile was a big highlight, but give me yours, and it could be the same one.
I've had like a journey with the Trump Epstein, just the Epstein files in general. I remember one of our first episodes. I wasn't sure, to be honest, as we were looking at the invasion of American cities, by armed forces domestically. When we were looking at some things, I wasn't sure where the Epstein files kind of ranked in priority there. And I sometimes doubted how high it was being lifted by a lot of people. But the more I see this story and its ability to just plainly show who the president is, because you and I were talking about this at dinner the other day. Most people aren't that politically plugged in. And when I was talking about how horrified I was that ICE was in Minneapolis, my buddies that weren't plugged in were unclear on the powers that the president had. They were unclear on if their claims about, rampant, what was the claim in Minnesota? It was rampant fraud.
Rampant corruption.
Fraud. It was fraud. Is that true? Is it not? There was like this confusion from people who were kind of sitting on the sideline. There's no confusion when you look at the Epstein files on just the disgusting nature of these people and what they were doing and how they would, how they use their power to abuse people. And I think that has been, as we've seen, the most animating force in creating fractions in dissent and defections of the Trump base. And so I was kind of wrong. I'll admit it. I was kind of wrong about this story, how human it was, the importance of it when I was thinking about priorities. And it's just been so great leaning in, getting to know the survivors, centering the survivors, and making sure that we're working, hand in hand with them and doing right by them. And so I agree. It was really cool. It was emotional. It's cool. I was more moved than I was expecting to be going into the reading room. It was a really emotional experience. And I think they just did a great job with it. So yeah, and it was just nice being in person with people. I'm shooting from Oregon all the time. It's great to be home. I'm back with my daughter, but it was nice to be with you all and walk into that space and see our friends from Safe America Movement and see our friends from Soze and see our friends from Institute for what's David's thing called? I always call it the Trumpsonian, but it's the Institute for Primary Facts. Well, it was just cool to see so many of our friends there.
That's their formal organization, but the Trumpsonian is their overall sort of like art activation effort. Yeah. And I've got to agree with you, my friend. It was a great culmination of effort. And I have been so taken with the survivors that we've interacted with. If you didn't watch our episode where we announced this on Wednesday, our weekly mission brief, I urge you to go watch it, because Danny Hanabensky, who was on with us, an Epstein survivor, blew us both out of the water. I mean, I think she reduced Xander to tears at a point in the program. And it just, look, they put an incredibly human face on this story that a lot of people just feel like is just in the headline. I'm laughing because Xander's got a little munchkin who visited the frame and who jumped in there. Hi there, sweetheart. It's Miles saying hello.
You want to say hi? Say hi to Miles. Oh no. Okay.
I know. Yeah. She's
All
like,
right.
I'm not ready for prime time.
Good day. 2 more minutes, baby.
But Xander, it was it was a powerful moment. So go check it out, folks. Defiance.org/bookmobile if you haven't already and want to help get it on the road. We have committed to helping our friends over at the Trumpsonian. We're going to build the truck for them. We're paying, Defiance.org members are paying and funding the creation of the truck to make that a mobile exhibit to go across the country. But you can help actually make it get there and help pay for the gas, get the thing on the road. We
need gas.
We need gas. He made gas so damn expensive, but it's not going to stop us. But we were thrilled to be able to tell them this week, we got you guys. This installation in New York City was remarkable. We're going to fund outfitting it to get it on the road. Now help us help them get it out there. So go check out defiance.org/bookmobile. People have been coming out in droves to support this thing.
People are fired up.
And there's a whole bunch of, it was a great idea at the last minute from the team to give people ways to actually like make this truck their own. So you can go take a look on that site. There's a bunch of different support levels where, folks can get their name in the truck, on the truck, as, one of the main sponsors, and a whole bunch of other different ways you can participate. I'm teeming with excitement, Xander, for July when this thing hits the road, because we've got a bunch of celebrities that have committed to elevating attention on this. But more than anything, the survivors have committed to go speak out at these stops in cities across the country. And we are happy to give them a big, loud microphone to keep spreading their message. So very, very grateful for everyone who's chipped in on that.
Totally. When I went home after that night, this word popped in my head. It was righteous. And there's times when I think what we're doing is good, but with this particular one, the word righteous really was resonating for me. And it just felt like, because of, there's like a micro macro level to it. We're fighting for our democracy. We're trying to convince people this guy's a bad guy, but also there's this justice for these survivors, and there's this human element to it too. And it felt like our community here is doing righteous work and leading in righteous ways. And so it just feels awesome moving with that energy.
For sure. And it was a week of announcements. We started off the week talking about different efforts underway with GTFO ICE and fight against federal overreach, and the Epstein mobile getting launched. And then yesterday we announced that we're teaming up with Democracy Defenders Fund to help go after the administration legally on the slush fund. And so stay tuned on that. Defiance.org members, you can go report.
Norm's also such a highlight. Norm's such a highlight.
It's for like 4 minutes, and it's always great to have him on because he's like a force of nature. You get 40 minutes of Norm in 4 minutes.
Totally. And he gives you like this permission to do this work. You and I think, do this pretty well as well, but it can be hard depending on the day to take on this work joyfully. Latasha Brown talks about it. MLK talked about it. We had Pastor Mike McBride who told us to lead with love on it, but you can kind of get lost in the drama. Or maybe even honestly not feel like it's appropriate. That's something I struggle with sometimes, not feeling like it's appropriate to be resilient and to move with joy. And Norm's such a star, and it has been successful in so many ways. And so him moving in that way always feels like it gives me permission to move in that way.
For sure. And I'm confident Norm's going to go win a lot of these cases. In fact, we may have big news about another case that they've won. And so we're very, very proud to continue to partner with them and to support their great efforts over at Democracy Defenders Fund. Xander, I realize we're 7 minutes into overtime. We're getting so close to being able to close out at an hour, but we just get so excited to tell you guys all the good news that's happening out there, all of the defiance that's happening. This has been a very, very busy week for us. I think Xander and I are both grateful we're going into a 3-day weekend. You will not see us on Monday. I hope
that's right.
You will take a relaxing Monday off. Xander's like, I was planning to be here.
I didn't even know. I didn't even know. That's
show,
great.
Xander. No
All right,
show.
I won't show up.
But take we hope that y'all are out there and planning to take a little bit of time for yourselves this weekend. And if we don't see you this weekend, if we can keep Xander off of the web, then we hope to see you on Tuesday at 5 p.m. Eastern. We've got a lot more coming next week. We've got a big announcement next Wednesday. It's crazy, Xander. I'd like to have a week where I can say to folks, hey, next Wednesday, we don't have a very big announcement. It's going to be good.
We're going to be Trump.
You know, we're going to
be Trump where the words don't mean anything. It's all great. It's the greatest ever.
yeah. But we might have an announcement next week that's as big as this one from this Wednesday or bigger. Look, it's another one we've spent months on, and we're really excited for this partnership. So we'll see where it goes, but we're trying to do right by our members to make sure that we're getting out there and staying loud. And in that vein, my friend Xander, we always say as we sign off, stay loud, friends, stay brave, stay together, and we'll see you here at Defiance Daily on Tuesday. Thanks so much.
See you.